Manhattan to hear Janos Starker play the Haydn D major concerto, and on the ride home I begged her to let me switch to the cello. The piano was a lovely instrument, but the cello sounded like a living, breathing animal with vocal cords made of amber. 5 minutes into that concert, I knew I had to sing through that animal's voice. I progressed with the cello so quickly and with such feverish intensity that by the time I was 9, there were no cellists left in our area qualified to teach me. My mother and I ended up moving to Germany so I could study with Johannes von Kempen, a brilliant cellist best known for his interpretation of German music, particularly Bach. My father stayed behind in Poughkeepsie, partly because he didn't want to lose his pension and medical benefits by quitting his shipping clerk's job, but also because he said he couldn't live in Germany again. So for that period, I saw him only when I traveled to the United States to give concerts, and every winter when he would come to Europe and meet us in Switzerland for the holidays. The hardest part about that move was being torn away from my friends in school. Up until that time, I had led a fairly normal social life. Few of the other children knew anything about classical music or were aware of the attention I was getting from adults for my playing. So although I was occasionally teased for not playing kickball or dodgeball, my mother had forbidden me to play any sports for fear that I might damage my fingers, I remember having a good time in school. Once we moved to Germany, however, I studied with a private tutor, whose salary and living expenses were enthusiastically provided by a wealthy lover of music, and my playmates were all adult musicians. I spent most of my time with Maestro von Kempen, and he was almost 90 when I first met him. Once we moved to Germany, my mother discouraged me from having any contact with children my own age, because she thought their immature games and interests might distract me from my studies. Whenever I complained of loneliness, my mother would tell me that God had given me a special gift, and as painful as it was for her to be so strict, it would be unforgivable if she allowed me to throw it away. She claimed that all of the sacrifices I was making as a child would be rewarded many times over when I was an adult, when, she assured me, everyone would want to play with me and be my friend. When I became a teenager and began to show an interest in girls, she told me to keep my mind on music, and guaranteed that if I followed her advice, the day would come when the most beautiful and cultivated women in the world would line up at the chance to date me. I remember her once saying when I was 16, "You're young still, just a child, and your stock's gonna keep going up, Renne. It will. Why cash it in too soon? You wait and see. You'll thank me someday." My mother saw to it that I followed this advice whether I wanted to or not. When I was 17, we traveled north to Sweden, where I had been invited to play the Lalo concerto with the Stockholm Orchestra. During one of the rehearsal breaks, the conductor's daughter, a year older than I, and herself a musician of some talent, invited me to have some coffee with her at a pastry shop just across the street. My mother had gone shopping during the rehearsal, so I figured it would be safe. Those 30 minutes were remarkable. Even though we could barely communicate with each other, I felt as if we had eloped, and my senses were as heightened as during a concert. I felt the snow collapse under each of my footsteps. I enjoyed my pastry as if it were the first time man had tasted fruit or custard, and every strand of her blonde hair spread out against her camel hair coat looked like spun gold. Deliriously happy, I asked her if we could repeat our date the next day. She agreed, but I made the mistake that night of urging my mother a bit too strongly to go shopping again the next afternoon. She became suspicious and returned to the hall early, then panicked when she learned I was not there. Thinking it would come as a relief to her, the conductor said that there was nothing to worry about, that I was with his daughter. But she did not welcome this news. As soon as I walked in the door, she pulled me out of rehearsal, embarrassing me terribly, led me back to our hotel, and made a frightful scene. She scolded me with uncharacteristic bitterness.